Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Michael Yeo, the President of KSI Strategic Institute, all the distinguished speakers and panelists, ladies and gentlemen, participants. First of all, I would like to thank Tan Sri for giving me a chance to come again this year. Last year we are here also to give some deliberations. Although time is only 20 minutes, my mind has a lot of things to talk actually, but have to focus to consume the right things to be delivered. Actually, I'm from Sabah, Minister of Education, for the information to our participants. My background is a medical doctor, and I'm from UKM and also from NUS. I did my master in NUS. This topic is very relevant with the present situations where we are caught red-handed in the COVID-19 tragedy. And it's mentioned by the previous panelists, we are not prepared. I think to begin with, let me make some statements about education. Number one, education's access and opportunity for all levels. Either preschools, primary, secondary, and higher education must be fair and equitable, open to all levels of society. Number two, the intention and responsibility of leaders in providing the education should be on the concept of no one should be left behind, irrespective of people, background, and positions. It is important that concept of fair and equitable education without compromising the education quality needs to be balanced in terms of developing spiritual and human values. Number four, besides the human needs and to continue to develop knowledge from birth to death, this continuing education will be able to form a civilized society in the lines with the national education philosophy. Education is a never-ending task. Number five, learning goals and outcome from preschool to high school must be considered students' abilities, interests, and local and national needs, so that the student can master the field well and be useful in the developing human capital that contributes to themselves, their families, in the society, in the country. Number six, mastering the goals and outcome of learning according to the needs of the country will facilitate them to be hired or able to develop their own business. Number seven, what are the major challenges in ensuring equal access to education in this country, especially in Sabah, in my states, is due to geographical shape, polar distribution of populations, community economics, and mixed cultures. Number eight, this challenge demands the leaders, the government, and the policymakers, what we have here, who have been entrusted by the people, should be proactive in seeking solutions rather than waiting for direction or simply surrendering to God's destiny without effort. Number nine, for institutions of higher learning that have a large number of well-educated people, looking for and finding solutions should be natural in ongoing process to share with the government, its policymakers, and society as a whole. Number 10, education is a responsibility for all. The students, the parents, the community, the society, the policymakers, the leaders, the schools, teachers, lecturers are all same importance in the responsibility. And this is not, should not be politicized. Education is beyond politics. It's a common interest for everybody. Talking about the relevance of tertiary education in this country. Of course, this place, I learned something when I visited Singapore last year. I'm an alumni or in US. I learned two things. One, when I met the president and discussed, I asked the president, now in US is number 8 in the world and number 1 in Asia. Number 8 in the world is just below University College of London, and up number 12 is Princeton University, USA. I asked the president, because also I know them, say, why make NUS so successful in education? He said, I learned from this. He said, 80% of our problems in university is solved through good primary and secondary educations. That's the answer. Because NUS is a very established, a very good university and number 1 in Asia. So this is the answer I got. Then when I realized what happened in Malaysia, in the state of Sabah, we have problem in the primary schools, secondary school, infrastructures, especially in Sabah. If you see the slides there, numbers of schools in Sabah, we have 1296, 1074 primary school, 222, like number of parliament seats, 222 of secondary schools. And we have a total of 1,300 schools in Sabah. Of these, we still have problems of schools. Almost 600 schools is a dilapidated school, wooden and ready to rent down. This is the infrastructures. I studied in Terengganu in 1969, Form 1. I already, that time, the school is already a brick school, no wooden school in Terengganu. And I asked my colleague in Johor, in many parts of Peninsula, no wooden school, no dilapidated school. But we are in Sabah, in Sarawak still. This is the infrastructure. How can we give a good education in primary school when we have this problem? That's number 1. Number 2, we still have a lack of facilities in school, teaching facilities. Not even, sometimes no chairs, no proper tables. We have problem with this. This is a Sekolah Daif in Sabah. And many schools, we don't have electricity, no water. How do we use computer? No electricity. No, don't talk about internet access. In Sabah, we are caught red-handed recently when we closed schools and asked for online teaching. The only about 15% of the student in Sabah who has computers, and about, mentioned just now, about 38% only access to laptop and also personal handphones or whatever gadgets they have. This is This is the schools that we have in Sabah, as you can see. And many areas are very, very far without internet. This is the I mentioned just now. Without internet, without access. Some area we need to go by boats for 7 hours to reach the school, or from the school to reach the town. This is the problem. If you see here, the blue one, only about 78% in the city area, the town, 78% only access to minimum access to the minimum data, and rural area only about 54%, and in the city only 44% in rural area. This is the data we can read from that side, and this is a very difficult position. How we can have this type of student, how to improve the student. And when I visited the students, many students still don't understand many words. This is our problem. For example, we don't expose them with the present situations. When I ask them what you want to become when you are growing, there are the two common answers. One is become police, and the other one become firefighters, bomba, and all teachers. When I ask them, do you want to become entrepreneur? They look each other. What is that? What is the words? In other words, they are not exposed to new things. Don't talk about IoT. Don't talk about the new words. Code writer, you don't understand. I think it's a time for Ministry of Education. We should start early with the new words in school. What is IR4? I'm sure many still cannot deliberate, cannot give a good definition of what is IR4. They don't understand how we can convert this when they enter university. Like myself, I'm a doctor. First time I heard the medical words is when I am entering the university. We should start from kindergarten. The people or the students in the kindergarten or in primary school should fluently speak what is IoT, what is virtual reality, what is Industrial Revolution 1, 2, 3, 4. They can deliver it with clear. That's why it's very difficult for us in this country. I think it takes time, but we need to do this. Why we cannot achieve things? Because these students don't understand words. For example, even in this room, maybe very difficult, not easy. When I ask, what is discipline? I have used to have lectures to the parents because the students' discipline. From one corner to another corner, there's no proper answer. What is discipline? Many answers, a variety of answers. Maybe in this room also, maybe if I ask here, it's different answer. What is discipline? How we discipline our kids when we don't understand the words of discipline? Disciplines, to me, is very simple. Is to follow rules. Rules that you make yourself, make by your parents, make by school, make by government, and make by God. So this is simple. And in Muslim also, when I ask, what is taqwa? From here to the other end, they don't understand what is taqwa. Taqwa means, kalau kita dalam bahasa Malaysia, bertakwa. Saya tanya, what is bertakwa? No really right answer. Taqwa is very simple. That's why we are always confused. Buat apa yang disuruh, jauhi apa yang dilarang. Follow what God asked you to do and avoid that prohibited to do. Just so simple. But people don't understand. So this is the problem. I think the most important in this one is we need to readdress this problem. We should start from the beginning, from below. From the house, the words from the mother's mouth, the father's mouth, and the kindergarten, primary school, secondary school, and also in university. That's why the answer I got from University of Singapore, they said, my problem solved 80% from primary and secondary schools. So that's why they can progress very fast. Number two, I learned on the entrepreneurship. We talk about entrepreneur in university. Everybody talk about university. But how many universities, tertiary educations, really do the actual entrepreneur? Of course, many are doing. But when I ask this is Singapore, why your entrepreneur is so successful? Of course, I think everyone here, the deans, the vice chancellors, know what to do. But maybe we don't do the proper assessment and really focus on this. When I ask why your entrepreneur program is so successful, the answer is NUS has Entrepreneurship Center, NSC. Government's giving students experience on live business, on works, in study, at the same time in the entrepreneur hubs. They have 12 entrepreneur hubs all over the world. For 6 months to 1 year overseas in a partner university at a different location. They have a Silicon Valley, they have in New York, Toronto, Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Stockholm, Munich, Lausanne, Israel, Singapore, Jakarta, and Vietnam itself. What do you mean with the actual? The student to be attached there 1 year, 6 months to 1 year to do the actual business. To set up a company, to do the business, like the one in MIT. It's one of the conditions to graduate, you must have your own business. But we are in our university just part-time, it's a theory, or visit, that's all. That's why we cannot produce the good entrepreneur. In Singapore, they said there are few students, but they have to graduate. They already make a $30 million worth of business. Their company is worth. There are many, 1 to 5 million is many, they said. And they can sell the company and they become millionaire while they are students still. So I think this is, I learned this too. So how do we go forward in our tertiary education? How to make this tertiary education relevant and 4.0 industrial revolutions? I don't want to elaborate what is industrial revolution 1, 2, 3, 4. But I just want to stress, I think somebody has to address revolution industrial 4.0. We have one, of course, one if I just very brief, in Revolution Industry 1, I think you know already. It began in Britain in around 1765 when the use of water and steam resource to combustion to move mechanical machinery, especially for agricultural transport such as railways. And the second revolution took place around 1870s when people manufacture large factory or vehicle. The famous one is a Henry Ford cars, machinery through electricity, when electricity was found. And the third industrial revolutions began in 1969 when introduction of digital computer, technology and automation system, robotic. But at the time, they have this one already. They have machine, but they work in silo. Robot works by itself. The others work by itself. But when it comes to Revolution Industry 4, began in this first in Germany, in Europe, and then China, and in Korea, and Japan now in our country, it is actually is a present in the future business. It's a combination, integration of all nations in the world, so they can talk each other to make things simple. They said using Revolution Industry 4.0, make your productivity 20% up, your efficiency 30%, your costs reduced by 20%, and your management is very efficient and you can monitor very easily. So this process needs to be understood when we teach the student, and we should start from the beginning. And Singapore, when I visited last year, they already start talking, I think developed countries start talking, IR 5.0 with the launching of 5G on the system, on the digital system, 5G. Singapore, this is start already. They're talking about IR 5.0 or even IR 6.0. So we are we should catch this. And how the university and the colleges should be in these pictures. They should wake up now and change our direction from traditional to a new. This is a new way of life. Why we do this? This is how we live in the future, or even now, how we work, how we are doing business, how we are doing, how we study. And with this COVID-19, it demands us to change and learn faster. If we don't change, we will be left behind. For colleges and university, if you don't change, if you don't transform, you will be obsolete. This is my ministry in Sabah. People said, why Sabah got Ministry of Education, since they have a Ministry of Education in Peninsula? We are not going to take over the roles of a Minister of Higher Education in the federal, but we complement. We will complement. In primary school, as I mentioned just now, state government pour money already. By today, during COVID, we already pour money, about 12 million to help the universities and schools and many other things. For example, repair, immediate repair. If you ask from federal government, it will take months or even year, don't come down. When I visit school, I immediately approve on the spot. I see the ceiling down, I approve from the state government money. So this is how we complement. But sometimes it's sad. I am barred from visiting school since last week from the federal government. So, but that's a politics. But I told you already just now, education is beyond politics. Although we are barred, the state government will continue to help because this is for the benefit of the people of Sabah. If we don't do things, we will be left behind forever. So this is a need of collaboration. I work with people from the Ministry of Education and Higher Education very well. They attended my meetings and we work together. And we will look forward and to solve many problems. Because although federal government said state has no roles, we still have power on land, on development plan, on CF, on many other things in the state. But this is the things. I think actually a lot of things to talk. Just like to conclude, to summarize in conclusions. How to ensure tertiary education relevant in the Industrial Revolution 4.0? Number one, all college, training center, university must be prepared to move forward, transform toward RI 4.0. Number two, managers and lecturers or the administrators of university must be sensitive, flexible to changes, to future needs of revolution Industry 4.0. Curricula, subjects, and methods of teaching must be reviewed, redesigned, realigned to the needs of the relevant industries or demand at this moment. Lecturers should be reviewed and new knowledge should be given to the teachers and lecturers. Number four, every higher learning institution should have MOU or collaboration with the relevant industries, especially industries using IR 4.0 or in the future 5.0 or 6.0. For country to progress and compete on the global stage, institutions for tertiary education must produce graduates who have knowledge and skills that can meet the needs of the country's workforce, as well as they have a high societal values. We give them knowledge, but there are no morals, corruption, no integrity. We don't want that in the future in our country. Research must be strengthened. It's mentioned just now in the paper presented during the, I think, message from the minister. Research must be strengthened with the element of innovation in all fields towards 4.0. COVID-19 taught us lots of things. How we live, how we work, how we are doing business from far, how because of the distance with the people. And COVID-19 is, I repeat again, demand us to change, to learn faster. And we should change how we handle things. So this is the thing that we need to focus. I believe the government, the policymakers, and the relevant authorities like panels, I think with this, we gathered together today, is very relevant and very useful for the country. I hope we will have, we can work together closely and achieve common goals to make our country progress and at the level with other developed countries in the world. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Yang Berhormat, for your passionate and insightful address. I'd like to invite the Minister to take his seat. Thank you. I understand that the Minister will be joining us in the panel and we'll be happy to take on questions during the Q&A. We'll now be moving into panel presentations. I'd like to hand over the time to Professor Dato Dr. Ansari Ahmad, the founding president and CEO of Asia E University, who will be moderating this session.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. And a very good afternoon, a very good morning still to all. Salam sejahtera. Thank you very much, MC. I don't think I'm going to give a long introduction. We have got 6 panelists with us, and I think Yang Berhormat Datuk Minister from Sabah has given a very good overview for the discussion, for this panel discussion itself. There are many thought-provoking issues that Dato you raised, and I think this panelists should be able to answer them. We've got 3 panelists here on face-to-face, and we have 3 more on Zoom. Can I just check whether the 3 on Zoom are there? Is Professor Dato Khalid there?
Yes, I am.
You are? Alhamdulillah, you are there. Prof Lily?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Prof Lily is from Singapore, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And last but not least is Prof Sulochana. Are you there?
You have to unmute.
Okay, I'm here.
Yes, you're there as well. Very good. So we have a full house of panelists. I will not waste much time. Maybe I'll start with Prof. Dato Khalid, since you have been very much involved in public sector as well as private sector, higher education, and been involved in quite a number of task forces, sector kind of thing. Maybe you can give your take on higher education and IR 4.0. You have about, all panelists have about 6 to 8 minutes. So can you start with your opening statements, please? We can't hear you, Prof.
Unmute.
I'm muted. Thank you very much, Prof. Ansari. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Good.
I can.
Good. Firstly, let me thank Dan Michael for this invitation and KSI. I'm delighted to join this panel because I think it's very important. I look at the title of our panel discussion. I think it's very important. That initially it was talk about what do we prepare for the RR 4.0. but now you put in COVID, post-COVID, and I think that's very, very important. Now, let's go back a few steps. Now, there has been a lot of complaints about universities. The universities are not training the sort of workers for the industry. The question is, are the universities supposed to be totally focused on training for specific industries? Yeah. So I think we have to think about that and think clearly what Prof. Mohd said earlier on. I think it's very, very important. Second is that the complaints about many graduates end up in jobs other than what they were trained for. Are we supposed to continue on along the same pathway, or we have education adequate enough for us to venture into new avenues? We have to think through very, very clearly. Now, people talk about that the industry, the universities are not training graduates for the industry adequately. Yeah, and people talk about the industrial 4.0. But at the same time, we were told that 50% of the sort of jobs in the future are yet to be created. So how could universities now train for jobs which are yet to be created? Now, so we have to think through very, very clearly. We have to expand the role of universities in terms of training the future citizens of the country, citizens of the world. I think this is very, very important. Now, coming back to COVID-19, I think there are a number of lessons that we have to learn. It would be a disaster if we went through this mess without learning a single lesson. And after this mess, we were to go back to what we were before COVID-19. A number of things that we have learned. First thing is that COVID-19, in actual fact, had brought up the best in the individuals and in the communities, and also in some circumstances, the worst in the individuals and in the community. We have to learn how this had happened, because that's very important for the future, for the new norm, which is evolving. Second is that COVID teaches us the essence of collaboration, right across the board, between individuals, between institutions, between disciplines. Yeah. Third is we have to understand what had been the enablers during the COVID threat that enables us to overcome the threat. One is, of course, the IT, yeah, and which allows us to continue in ongoing education, online education, and of course, we have this massive digital divide in this country, not just between East Malaysia and West Malaysia, but even in Klang Valley, there are spots, and many of them which are not quite there yet in terms of supporting the sort of education required when we talk about online education. Fourth is about the care for the environment. Care for the environment. Just think about Wuhan wet market, and I won't go into details. Yeah, why this came about? Yeah, this COVID. How did it come about? And what more can come about if we really don't care about our environment? And at the same time, you could see that the environment can correct itself very quickly if we stop disturbing it. And fifth, and this is very important, and this is the role of the university, empowering the individual, the power of one. Now, Prof. Mohd talk about resilience and so on and so forth, and I'll talk to that in a moment about that. So these are very important observations that we take into consideration. What's the future? I'll be finishing soon. What's the future? First is that there must be strong collaboration and cooperation, not just between institutions, between individuals, but also across disciplines. There has been a lot of talk about dichotomy between science and non-science and arts and humanities. In actual fact, COVID teaches us the importance of putting all this together. Yeah. Second is that we have to consider about what are the needed skills and knowledge in the future. IT, for example, very important. The sciences, very important. Life sciences in particular. Social sciences, very important. But in what shape and format? We have to think through. Yeah. If not, we'll be an outlier soon enough. Third is, in congruence with skills and expertise, we have to think in terms of putting in meaning and values to higher education. The sort of things that Prof. Mushtaq mentioned this morning, very, very important. This has been, by and large, neglected because we're running with the IR and we've neglected the human side of it. Yeah, and that is very, very important for us to learn about this lesson. Fourth, care of the environment. Fifth, care for oneself, one's family, and the society. It cannot be a one-off thing. It has to be incorporated. You need to take care of your diet. You need to take care of your exercise, for example. Nobody can do it for you. And at the same time, you need to take care of your family. You don't want other people to look after your family and about your community, and so on and so forth. I won't go into detail. I mentioned about power of one. How can there be power of one when we instruct our students to be instructed individuals? How is it possible? We talk about the importance of critical thinking, innovative thinking, creative thinking. Sure, but we must bring in the idea, the ability to have constructive thinking. Whatever we do, it will be constructive. I'm not. I'm an engineer, for example. If I build this bridge, what happens with this bridge in this environment? I'm a doctor. If I do this, what? And so on and so forth. Yeah? And there is a whole list of things that we can do with this. And lastly, and this is very important, and often neglected in all the discussion that we have about higher education in this country. The question is, what does Malaysia have to offer for the world in the world of higher education? Or we're just mere adapters and adopters? We don't have anything solid to contribute to the world of higher education? Let's think about that. I think I will stop there, but thank you very much for this kind invitation.
Thank you very much, Prof. Dato Khalid. You raised several points, and I think the most important point you raised was that are we moving forward in business as usual? And you put several different things you're talking about in terms of future. I just want to connect that with what YB Datuk was talking about just now. How do you see Malaysia as a whole in terms of higher education, looking at the divide that we have in terms of infrastructure, in terms of social skills, in terms of what you call digital divide, etc. How do we reconcile that as we move forward in this age of IR 4.0 and post-pandemic?
Sorry, I was not. What were you saying?
No, I was just trying to link what you were talking about just now in terms of how the future, the power of one, and the need for us not to have business as usual, but going into business unusual. But I was saying that taking into cognizance of Malaysia's education landscape and what YB Dato Menteri was talking about just now in terms of the divide, you know, between the have and have-nots, between the rural and the urban, and the digital skills, digital device, difficult and endowment, etc. kind of thing. How do you propose we address this issue as we move forward?
Okay, there are two things that I want to touch upon as an immediate response. First, we've heard about digital divide. That needs to have a whole government approach to this. Yeah, that we cannot have pockets in Sabah, Sarawak deprived of what they should have. Yeah, as part of the nation. And we cannot have pockets in the Klang Valley suffering what Sabah and Sarawak does. We have to have an overall constructive plan about what is not available and what can be done. First point. Second point is that over the COVID period, you can see that SMEs were thriving, that the individuals are able to come up with innovative ways to create businesses, yeah? And SMEs are often neglected, most by universities. Why is it so? Why can the universities work together with SMEs and provide new avenues and skills for us to enhance it further, yeah? To the point that, well, you know, you look at the Alibaba, for example, yeah? Appealing, addressing to the needs of individuals in the community, and lo and behold, becomes a large industry. So these are two specific areas that we have to focus upon, and this will provide a better returns to us in the future.
Thank you. Let me move now to one of the panelists here, Prof Zita, are you ready to take on next? Yeah, would you like to go last? Okay, she would like to go last. Mr. Tay, would you like to go next? Yeah, please.
Thank you, Prof. Ansari. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the organizer, KSI, and again, last week I was here. Thanks to Tan Sri Michael Yeo for inviting me back again to this annual education conference. My sharing of the experiences and know-how on this topic is going to be broken into two. I'm just going to give through a very brief rundown of what had taken place the last 4 months or so, from my perspective, where I hit the establishment that's born out of a wedlock between the University of Malaya and University of Wales, the International University of Malaya and Wales, and that's where I am. The last since beginning of this year, I do think that many of the audience coming from the private university and higher education would share with me and would agree with me that a large percentage of their revenue is very much still dependent on the student recruitment and enrollment. And obviously, with the lockdown of the many national borders, plus the fact that the imposition of the MCO in response to the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a drastic drop in the number of students in the various semesters, starting from February until even today. The worst case scenario I've come across was something in the region of 50-60%. From where I come from, our figures were no different from that has been said. However, we had expected the lockdown much as early as January, as we saw the signs coming up where you have cases of these infections happening everywhere. And when it did take place in a place called Brickfields, where we are not very far from there, we started to raise the alarm bell. However, we also have put in the business continuity plans. As a commercial enterprise, we have always been constantly in consultation with our shareholders and also our stakeholders on that. The main intent is to put the student interest first, followed by a number of things to ensure that we are able to function as a university that is responsible and committed to deliver what the students want from us. Efficiency remains our priority, so we didn't give much room to that, to any further consultation on that. But the good thing is that we did not have to downsize our workforce. We maintained whatever we had, except to continue to focus on our priorities. But in terms of the effect of the IR4, I think if you take that effect, we roll out a number of our online delivery. The digital impact of us have always been there, but we took the opportunity to ensure that we had in place the online and so on and so forth. So I shan't bore you with much of this detail, but the one lesson learned among the private university is that cost containment and cost efficiency, but more importantly, cash flow is the key to our survival. We use the word survival now because we don't talk about thriving in these tough times, so long as we continue to deliver what the shareholders demands of us. Not too long ago, we had to revise our budget. We revised our plans, and we make sure that we get the numbers we want. And importantly, from a private university perspective, and that's different from public universities, there's two sides of the coin. Either you sell well or you produce well. That's it. We don't have any other secret formula to ensuring the success of this. However, we also discovered that technology is the key. And technology is one that we will continue to use, and that nicely put in part of our rebuilding. The IUMW, which I inherited not too long ago, is in the process of rebuilding its university. We are not in the Premier League. We hope we get promoted to Premier League perhaps in the future, but we focus very much on rebuilding both the infrastructures as well as our growth strategy. One of the important things out of this is the use of technology across our delivery systems, and we have successfully, for the first time in our 7 or 8 year history, the e-exams. It's not a new thing, but it is new among our immediate stakeholders, of which we have to spend much time coaxing and as well as providing the online training and development. Development of people continue, as many of the speakers have already said this morning, focusing on the non-academic skills, which is really very much on understanding and the delivery systems, and also the ability to communicate and convince students. Okay, so that's it for what we've done. In terms of the relevance of the tertiary education, which is really the main topic for this session. Now, we all agree that tertiary education is really necessary for the many exciting discoveries, and I've always been, have great respect for scientists and so on, for their massive discovery across the various sectors, from medicine right down to management and so on. And their proper dissemination and application of knowledge is still very much have led to countries being well developed, educated, and as well as able to deliver the value proposition to the citizens at large and so on. In this regard, I see the relevance of universities, and I still see the relevance of them in its role, whether it is in its present role or future role or in the traditional role. It has a purpose. It has its purpose. It has a duty to play, to influence the world agenda. Whether or not some have gone distracted in other ways, but the primary traditional role of university must remain. In this context, the COVID-19 pandemic has given a renewed opportunity for university to take that route. Here, I'd like to share, if you permit me, Chairman, there are 7 points which I thought would be good for us to think through. One is the education allows us the innovation in its foundation towards the development of a more sustainable world. In fact, this morning I heard so many people talk about sustainability, but what they meant was a very narrow definition of sustainability of universities here. Here I'm talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, of which we had the world community had agreed to in 2016, the SDG goals, of which we mustn't forget. There are 17 of them, and education is one of them. And I like to reiterate what the major shareholders have talked about, of which Malaysia is the main shareholder in the United Nations setup. Sustainable Development Goals have given us the vision on the future clarity of its purpose and the responsibility for all stakeholders, including us and the institution as a university, to embrace, and a commitment for all of us to participate. Whether you participate indirectly or directly, I think it doesn't matter, because higher education is instrumental to producing growth. Growth not only in terms of intellectual know-how, but new wealth in order to reduce poverty. You need wealth to boost that shared prosperity, not just extracting wealth from the ground, but able to deliver the new wealth. We heard this morning also people talk about new multidisciplinary discipline, and it's not new. I think we talk about cross-fertilization between different disciplines. Fourth, the education institutions and provider must also bridge the technology advancement, which means that not only you insist on financial literacy among the various stakeholders, but also technology literacy is one which they need to do to ensure that there is a bridge between the have and the have-nots, as well as the social divide as well. And this is important. So we need to relook at the fresh investment, as Professor Khalid was talking about here, to transform both in order to transform both the workforce from the academic and non-academic, we need to have a better agenda to understand the social needs as well, and so on. Lastly, the IR 4.0 is not just a buzzword, it's already happening. We are already using it. To what extent that we use it, it's really depending on our lifestyle. But we need to be able to cope with this. And lastly, before I sign off, I think a new partnership is required between the education institution and the industry, so that we can move away from a very silo approach. But my last point here is this. As the world is moving away from globalization, nationalism is taking place, and there is no reason why the institutions involving the stakeholders in this room should play that part towards rebuilding the country's welfare, as well as the sustainable development of this nation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. T. This afternoon, we'll be hearing quite a lot about not following the normal track of business as usual. We're going into business unusual. I think YB Datuk Minister referred to it, as well as Prof Khalid referred to it. I think you're in many ways, in your 7 points, also referring to it. Do you think the current, way in which we manage our higher education institutions in Malaysia, and looking at the landscape here at higher education institutions, and the constraints in which we work, whether universities will be allowed to innovate and do business unusual, as what we are all demanding for the future?
Thank you, Chairman. Maybe I'll just answer it another way. We keep talking about that the private university alone has produced 80 billion ringgit. That should be no reason why we should not be able to have the wealth to work collectively to deliver that social agenda. The university should not just look at themselves as one of a profit entities. We must go beyond that. As our stakeholders continue to be enlarged and in a different way and in different lights.
Thank you. We'll move on to Prof Lily. I hope she's there. Prof
Yes,
Lily?
I am. Yes, I am.
Right. I hope you're safe and sound in Singapore.
Yes, yes.
The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Wawasan Open University, as you know, is in Penang. But I'm dialing in from Singapore. And I think Prof. YB, Minister of Education from Sabah, indicated that he was in Singapore last year. I have been in Wawasan for about 15 months. And YB, you mentioned about entrepreneurship and innovation. I left NUS as Deputy President in charge of innovation and entrepreneurship, the enterprise center that you mentioned, and setting up the many colleges overseas. And I'll be more than happy to share this in a different forum or on a one-on-one basis with colleagues in Malaysia to see how we can get this going in Malaysia for those who are interested. The whole idea is not just entrepreneurship. The whole idea really is job creation. If our young people can create their own entities and it becomes our indigenous companies, be it in Singapore, be it in Malaysia, that was the whole purpose, job creation for the young generation. So let me talk a little bit. Prof. Ansari, you know, we have the same education platform, and one would think that the pandemic would not have affected us, but it did in different ways. We are open distance learning university with online learning education platforms. And how has the pandemic affected us? We do have face-to-face tutorials once a month for all our courses, and that had to go online. Our staff had to work from home, and many of them had to carry their desktop computers home because they didn't have access to computers at home. All that was done within 24 hours. So you know, I took my hat off to all my colleagues who managed to do that. And for those who are in areas in Penang and on the mainland, our staff, there were pockets where they could not, where the interconnectivity was really bad. And we had to buy dongles, we had to buy whatever we can to ensure that our staff could work from home. For students with tutorials, because we have tutors from all over the country, it was the same old story. So that too affected us. And we had to do what we can to make it happen. Other than that, e-exams, assignments, and I'd like to come back to this later on, we had to reinvent how we assess away from the traditional ways of assessing whether our students have really imbibed what they have imbibed. So let me talk about new innovations to introduce given this COVID situation. Couple of things that became very, very obvious to me as a new VC, and like all new VCs, you've got lots and lots of ideas. Whether or not they can be implemented, you have to work it through one by one. I felt that during this period, because a lot of students, our students are working adults. So they are working part-time or they're working full-time. And all of a sudden they're at home, they have their kids around them, and many of them found it very difficult to continue on to complete the assignments because they have kids all over, they have to cook dinners, they have to cook lunches, so on and so forth. We had to pace how they were studying. And I think one of the innovations as institutions we need to think about is, can we personalize adaptive learning for our students? In some countries, in some universities, top universities, they're already doing that. But we are working, our student population are working adults. Is there a way, are there individualized approaches that takes learner diversity, their performance, their speed of learning, and have all this automated? Ideally in an LMS, a learning management system, so that the students are able to adapt. So I call it personalized adaptive learning as one innovation that as a university, we would like to look into. The other part of it is, I would like to say, assessments reimagined. Meaning, not to do away with final exams, because I know there are requirements. Can we find different ways? Can we do research? Can we look at the pedagogy? How can we figure out new ways of assessing our students, whether they have imbibed something or they have not imbibed something, through the distance learning format and online education? As many of you know, online education has its own sets of issues. But we realized during this period that during our tutorials, our students were asking more questions. Why were they asking more questions? In tutorials in a class of 25 or 30, they were shy. Now they have this computer in front of them and they can type the questions. And the tutors were telling us that there were a lot of questions coming in. So that takes learning to a slightly different dimension. Can we find new ways to do this? Obviously, you know, using intelligent digital automation, we can really see how we can monitor student journeys and have it student interactions across the whole country. Tutorials in Penang, tutorials in KL, tutorials in JB, tutorials in Sabah and Sarawak. How do we connect these students? These are some of the innovations that I am looking forward to implementing within WOU. Now, IR 4.0. Can a ODL institution, an ODL platform, offer and be relevant? Absolutely. Our students are all working adults. They are already in the real environment. So we need to think, what is it that they need? Obviously, they come to WOU, they come to universities because they want to upgrade themselves. And the skills that we offer them in the university are traditional. We have not gone out beyond. We provide according to program standards, and they have to study course 101, course 102, course 201, course 202. Can we re-look at some of these curriculum and see if we can reprioritize some of the skills that they need to learn? For example, Communication skills is very important. I think throughout this morning, everyone talked about it. These are for us in an ODL platform, adult students, as well as in traditional face-to-face universities. Communication skills is absolutely important in today's environment. Can we provide better communication skills? Can we provide digital literacy? Working adults, digital literacy is so important. Can we have foundation courses in very simple coding? Because coding sort of brings your thinking in a more logistic area, a lot more logistic pathway. Can we introduce simple coding to every student when they come in? The whole world has changed, right? And I realize that WOU, our students are, more than 85% of our students are below 40 years old. So they are in this generation. How do we, obviously entrepreneurship, enterprise, innovation is something that we would like to encourage. But how do we integrate knowledge from different disciplines that in today's environment, a single domain is no longer relevant, the expertise. To study engineering, you need communication skills, you need digital literacy skills, of course you need your engineering principles, but you also need to understand climate changes, you need to understand various aspects, you need to understand the social aspects. So how do we integrate all this and reimagine education curriculum in the future? And this requires a lot of help, a lot of collaborations with colleagues from all other universities in Malaysia and possibly around the world. One of the exciting things in an ODL platform is that we can now invite speakers, and you all can see it. I mean, the last 3 months we've been doing Zoom meetings, Zoom webinars, Zoom conferences. We can actually invite the who's who around the world to dial in and talk to our students. Previously, we have to fly them in, we have to spend a lot of money doing all these things. Today, many of them who are also stuck at home are more than happy to talk to our students, to open up their minds, to open up their thinking. I think I just want to end here. Obviously, there's a lot to discuss, but I'm happy as a new VC to want to meet everyone and see how we can collaborate together. And YB Menteri from Sabah, we would like to see my pitch, how we can work with you, WOU in Sabah. Looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Lily. Prof, obviously you're in a slightly different space from the traditional universities, and the impact of COVID or living in a post-COVID world, as well living in an IR 4.0 would be slightly different. I think the short question I have for you is that how would somebody in the ODR space look at lifelong learning? Because when you talk of IR 4.0, you have to also talk about lifelong learning. So how would you address lifelong learning in the IR 4.0 era?
We need to work with industry. There is no question about that. Courses can be blended. If they are in industry, can we corral similar-minded students in particular industries? And I'm using Penang as an example. Can we corral technicians, engineers in the same similar industry to come together to work with universities like us to provide learning? And it may or may not need to lead to a degree. We also want to see how we can simulate. We've got 2 courses, 2 programs. One is Bachelor of Technology in Electronics, Bachelor of Technology in Mechatronics. How can an ODL institution provide this? And I think we've worked very hard with MQA to be able to provide this. The number of lab courses can be shrunk. We can do a lot of simulation. We need new innovation in teaching through simulation. So these are some of the things that we can do. And I think ODL platforms needs to be reimagined, I suppose. That's the word to use, yeah.
Thank you very much. Let us move on to, I think, the only computer scientist here on this distinguished panel who's is a computer scientist as well as an expert on AI. So I think he's best to talk about IR 4.0. So Prof. Graham.
Thanks for that. And thank you to KSI and Tantri for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be on such a distinguished panel. I do want to talk about AI. I am a computer scientist and I teach artificial intelligence and I do research in that area. And when I first talk to my undergraduates, the first lecture I ever give to my undergraduates on artificial intelligence, I say to them, imagine you're in the Stone Age and you're cavemen, and I walk in with a Pentium computer and I show you what it can do. Would you, as cavemen, consider that machine intelligent? And most of the students put their hand up. And I say, well, imagine you are now students on an undergraduate course entering into computer science, and it's 2020, 2021, and I show you the same computer and show you what it can do. Would you consider it intelligent? And most of them say no, they wouldn't. It's not intelligent, it's just a computer. They know what's going on behind the scenes. And then I say, imagine yourself in 12 weeks' time when I've finished all this artificial intelligence lectures and I peel off my face and I show you that I'm a robot. Would you consider that robot to be intelligent? Most of them put their hand up and say yes. And I say, but there's no difference between the caveman and a Pentium computer and an undergraduate student and a robot. It's just your perception. So how do we know when that computer is intelligent, whether it's a Pentium computer or a robot? And it comes back, or one similarity is the Turing test. And I won't go into my undergraduate lecture, but Alan Turing, one of the computer scientist pioneers in 1950, defined how you tell if a computer is intelligent. And that was if you could talk to the computer and you didn't know you were talking to the computer. And he said, a computer will be shown to be intelligent by the end of the century. That actually wasn't the case. Nothing passed the Turing test by the year 2000, and it's arguable whether it's passed it now. So I think artificial intelligence is really difficult to measure, and everyone talks about IR4 and artificial intelligence, but we don't actually know what artificial intelligence is, and even if we do, we don't know it when we see it, and we can't measure it. If we look at what's been happening over the last few months, again, one of the things I've spoken about before is that the HE sector has never been disrupted. Yeah, we still have Sage on the stage, 50-minute lectures. We've been doing that for hundreds of years. And it will be disrupted someday. So in the same way that Airbnb, Uber, Amazon all disrupted their industries, something will come along and disrupt the HE sector. And most people are looking at COVID-19 and saying that's now disrupted the HE sector. I don't think that's necessarily the case. Potentially it's the case, but it's not necessarily the case. Everyone's talking about the new normal, but I think the new normal is actually you have to run faster just to stay with the competition. I wrote an article a couple of months ago in The Star about the Red Queen effect. And what COVID-19 has done for us is make us run faster just to stay where we are. And that's on an international level. We're all trying to compete with everyone, and the people that come out of COVID-19 better equipped are going to be the people that survive and go on to do better things. And whether we, as in Malaysia, or the institutions in Malaysia are there, I don't know. I don't think anyone knows that yet. So if we look at artificial intelligence, I don't think we know what artificial intelligence is. There's no real definition that everybody agrees on. So we have to be careful when we talk about artificial intelligence. When we talk about IR4, IR4 is, the Minister gave a great definition of the various industrial revolutions, 1, 2, 3, and 4. IR4 to me is merging of the digital and the biological world, or the physical world, with things like augmented reality. And if we really wanted to disrupt the education sector, one way of doing that is you put on a headset, maybe it's Google glasses, but you put on some sort of headset and you're transported to a lecture theatre surrounded by lots of other people. And to you could be sitting there in the lecture theatre physically, or you could be sitting in a laboratory physically. So IR4 is merging the physical and the digital. And as the Minister said, people are already talking about IR5 and IR6. And IR5, again, there's no widely accepted definition of what IR5 is, But one definition you hear, it's when machines really show intelligence. So at the moment, machines aren't really intelligent. We can argue they are. If you go back to 1994 when Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov, everyone assumed that computers were now intelligent because they can play chess better than the best chess champion that's ever been known. But actually, what gave Deep Blue its power was it was searching 200 million chess positions a second, which is impressive, but it's not intelligent. It just could look much further forward than Garry Kasparov could. AlphaGo, which recently beat the best Go champion in the world, that was predicted to be about 10 years' time, but actually because of the work in things like deep neural networks, it came about a lot quicker. But is that intelligence? I would argue that it's probably not. We'll look back in a few years' time and say, actually, it's just a very clever computer program. So one thing we need to do is define what machine intelligence is. And should we be looking, everyone's in this room and all the speakers have been talking about IR4, but should we hitch ourselves to IR4 or should we hitch ourselves to IR5 or even IR6? Or should we be looking even further ahead? So I think for the direction of travel, and I agree with everything that everyone said about, about social skills and communication and everything, but I'm really trying to look at it from the perspective of the technology. The direction of travel for us coming out of COVID-19 is really about, do we want to be disrupted? And if we do we want to disrupt the education sector, or do we want to try and play catch up? And it's obviously a lot easier to be leaders than followers. We should be looking beyond IR4, we should be looking beyond probably IR5 and IR6 and not tie ourselves into that, because there's no real definition of IR4, there's no real definition of IR5. And what I would do is try and set a grand challenge, maybe that Malaysia can take up on, maybe which it can be a public-private partnership. And there's many things that we could do. But just as one suggestion, and coming back to my caveman and my robot example from the beginning, is why don't we aim to have a robot deliver an undergraduate lecture and can answer any questions from the students, and at the end of that lecture, the students don't know they've had a lecture from a robot. That would be a really grand challenge, and if we could do that, that might not be intelligent in a few years' time, because that's something called the total Turing Test, if you're interested. But that would really give us something to aim for, rather than saying we're doing IR4, IR5, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, big data, data science, all of which have got different meanings to different people, but set one grand challenge which Malaysia can try and strive to, which will really set ourselves from the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham, for telling us the difference between computer crunching power and computer intelligence, or artificial intelligence. A cheeky question from me, because there's a lot of people who talk about this, saying that as we move into IR 4.0 and move onwards into IR 5 and IR 6, we will become dehumanized. And I think the issue of STEM subjects and STEAM subjects and the importance of arts and humanities and how do you remain as humans is something which is concerns. Do you think the University of the Future should be looking at more of that, keeping us as humans and what makes us humans and the difference between us and machines?
I suppose the glib answer is that there's not a lot we can do about that. We will gradually more become dehumanized, and I think as we merge the physical and the digital, there's even people walking around now with chips in their arms, and we can argue that they're partly robotic. I mean, it's not very common, but we're going that way. But it does come down to a philosophical argument. I mentioned the Turing Test, and there was lots of, it goes back to the 1950s, but lots of discussion about, one of the things they said is if you take out every neuron in the brain and replace it with an electrical circuit, and you did that throughout the brain, are you still human? Because it acts exactly like the brain. So you sort of go into a philosophical argument, but I think the way advances will go, we can have that discussion, but ultimately things will change, which we can't even envisage now.
Thank you. I hope, Prof. Sulochana, you are there? Sulochana? Yes, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, loud and clear.
Loud and clear, okay.
Okay, the floor is yours, Sulochana.
Okay, there have been several things that have already been discussed, and perhaps, first of all, I would like to thank Tan Sri Michael, because I'm actually a bidang terjun in this panel. I was supposed to be on an earlier panel, but was caught up somewhere else. Thank you, Tan Sri, for allowing me to come on this panel. And there are lots of issues and questions that have been raised. For a university that is already an ODL university, it is much easier. The COVID brought, I think, lesser shocks for you than it did for traditional universities. So what has happened with the COVID, and universities have actually been forced to actually go on to online. Whether they were ready or not was secondary, but they've been forced to go online. So what does that require from the students as well as the lecturers? And the ODL universities have resolved this, traditional universities have not. So one of the things that has happened with traditional universities is that because we've been actually pushed online, we've had to cope with a lot of different things. First of all, let me deal with two key stakeholders in this equation. One is the lecturer. The lecturers themselves, who are used to traditional forms of teaching, suddenly find themselves being forced to actually teach online. And this requires a lot of change in teaching strategies, in mindset changes, new paradigms, etc. And teachers have to be willing and to be able to adopt and adapt to this new way of teaching. And the role of the lecturer in an online platform is different from that of a lecturer in a traditional classroom. One of the things that the lecturer in an online platform is not a top-down kind of lecture that we are all accustomed to. It has to be a lecture which is more engaging, where the student and the lecturer actually creates that learning process. And that it requires a different kind of a lecturer. But does that mean we sack all our lecturers or we train them? I think the answer is not to sack the lecturers, but to train them. The second thing that happens is that the lecturers, especially during the MCO, and even currently, of course, we can offer them the university space to do the lectures, but during the MCO, they had to operate from home. So they had to juggle many things. Dr. Lily was saying something about lecturers coming home and having to cope with so many other competing demands in the house. So this is another change, and it requires a real mindset change. And also, doing an online lecture requires the right environment. Your home may not be the best environment to actually give this kind of a lecture. And also, the lecturer needs to be able to have the right connectivity, the right internet, the speed of the internet, as well as the proper computers and gadgets. So that is also a financial investment on the part of traditional lecturers. If you want to go onto an online platform, some of it will be covered by the university. But if your lectures are, you're delivering a lecture to a different part of the world in a different time zone, you cannot be hanging around the university. You have to do it from your house. So you have to make sure that the environment in your home is a conducive one for you to actually deliver this lecture. What else happens? The other thing is the student. Not all students are geared towards online learning. It requires a different set of skills for the part of the students. The traditional ODL universities have adult learners. We do not have adult learners. We have younger generation of students who are restless, who actually don't like coming to classes. They will find that the online platforms much more attractive for them to be attending classes. But again, you see, it requires good communication skills, good reading and writing skills. It also requires the student to be able to be disciplined, be able to be good at time management, and all of these other things, because it doesn't happen just overnight. So there is a mindset change for lecturers. There's a mindset change for the students. But what about the university? The university also has to have a mindset change, a paradigm shift. in order to move their lectures, their exams, their admissions, everything onto the online platforms. And in addition, it is, okay, we are the university, the private or public, we are just one of the stakeholders. What about the ministry? What about the quality assurance departments? How does that happen for an online platform? For a non-traditional, for a traditional university? Again, there must be changes, there must be paradigm shifts, there must be mindset changes, and again, the role of these respective stakeholders who are part of the education ecosystem has to change. Because if this doesn't change, then what's going to happen is that there will be a big disconnect between the regulators, the quality assurance enforcers, as well as the university. So in order for so this brings me to my next point. What is the university of the future going to look like? And the students who are going to be part of the university, Dato Khalid, you raised the issue about whether it's the role of the university to train students for the industry, and how can you train students who are for an industry that does not exist. I think my response to Dato Khalid's question would be that you have to train students who are critical thinkers, students who are adaptive, who are flexible, and can work beyond their disciplines. Many of us are actually going beyond our disciplines when we are taking on administrative roles as CEOs of universities, etc. We were not trained in our basic disciplines. We were not trained to do any of these jobs. But if you are adaptable and flexible, you learn. You learn on the job, you hit the ground running, and you really learn on the job. So what is the university of the future going to look like? Is a university still relevant? And I agree with the speaker that the university is still relevant, but maybe not in its current form. It may not be a brick and mortar kind of university that we are talking about. It could be a university that's probably using a different kind of platform. But I think there's still a core of the university that has to remain. So what happens to lecturers and staff? I think one of the things that will happen is that lecturers will be brought in like in the gig economy. You come in and you teach a course one semester. You don't have a permanent job with any universities. Many of us stayed with public universities for almost all of our adult lives, like 30 over years. We were in public universities and we joined private universities. But the thing is, in the future, this is not going to be the pattern. Nobody can look towards a university, especially young aspiring lecturers. They will not look at a university as for long-term employment. What's going to happen is that they're going to work in a gig economy. And in a gig economy, it's all short-term, it's contract, and it's like on the job. Like you come in for a semester, you come in for half a semester, you deliver a program, and then you're out of that university. So then the question is, what happens to teaching permits? Right now, I think there is a movement where teaching permit is not linked to an institution, but more to the individual. And I think this is the way forward. So the ministry, the enforcers, then what happens to students? Students who are learning in different platforms, in different parts of the world, what about degree recognitions? And what about employers? Will the quality of education that's delivered by traditional universities be the same as that on the online platform? And I think that there shouldn't be any difference. It should be the exact same kind of program that you're delivering, but you're delivering it differently. The same disciplines, the assessment modes will have to change. It cannot be the traditional assessment modes that were approved by MQA. It has to change to a different kind of assessment modes. And what are you actually examining? What are you actually assessing? When you're dealing with university students, this is the kind of students that we are going to deal with who are restless, who do not like being tied down to anything. So I think the assessment mode should be more on the learning process, whether the student has been able to absorb whatever learning that has been set out by the lecturer and the curriculum for that student, whether that learning has actually happened. And also the other thing that I want to add is that the university that would look, in addition to the staff, again, ministries and all this paperwork that we are burdened with by institutions that we deal with, all that has to change, because if it doesn't change, we will have one set of one part of the ecosystem moving very fast, and another part of the ecosystem actually dragging down the progress and the development of the university. Whether we are talking about IR 4.0 or the IR 5.0 or 6.0, we have to change. Everybody has to change, and it's no longer going to be business as usual. We cannot go back to the pre-COVID days. The COVID has actually opened up a lot of cracks in the system. It has opened up a lot of weaknesses, but it's also unveiled a lot of strengths in the university, strengths among students, strengths in the community, strengths in SMEs. We didn't have a whole, of course, a lot of institutions have shut down, but there are also a lot that has survived and thrived, overcoming the effect of the MCO and also the effect of COVID-19. Because right now it's a new normal. From, I think, in 2 days' time, if you are in a car with an additional person, you have to wear a mask. It's very uncomfortable. It's okay for the doctors. They're used to wearing masks. The rest of us are not used to wearing masks. So it's not okay for us, but we have to comply. And if we don't comply, what happens is the law has to come and crack down on us. So for the education system, we have to have a lot of new compliances, and the role of the ministry has to change from that of being the regulator and also the enforcer to being a facilitator. And this will go a long way so that all components of the educational ecosystem move at the same pace. So that Malaysia's aspirations to become the hub for education will be even enhanced, because now students don't have to physically come into the country to actually do a degree. They can do their total degrees online, and this will be actually a fascinating opportunity. There are lots of opportunities that have opened up as a result of COVID-19, and these are the opportunities that universities need to leverage on, so has to remain relevant for the future. And again, the other comment that I want to respond to, because the SDGs were mentioned, and one of the SDGs is something that I'm very passionate about, that is on reducing poverty. And of course, the YB minister from Sabah did talk about the digital divide. He did talk about how can you talk about technology and online platforms when a particular area does not even have electricity. So these things have to be put in place. So there are different needs for different segments of society. And Dr. Khalid, you did mention that the access to digital technology was not even within the Klang Valley, and this is absolutely true. Because if you are living in a medium or a low-cost apartment, the cost of the internet is not exactly cheap.
Prof,
So yes.
I need to intervene. I think we're running out of time.
Okay, I will just conclude with that.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ansari.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think she's eaten into the question time, so there's no question for Prof. Sulochana. I'll go straight on, and to save time, I'll go straight on to Prof. Zita. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ansari, and I just want to take my gratitude to Tan Sri, KSI, the sponsors and organizers of the conference for this kind invitation. I'm here to share my personal view. I've been asked by Dr. Ansari not to talk about 4IR, neither am I going to talk so much about COVID-19. He says, talk about QA. I said, why do I have to talk about QA? I have left that world some time ago, but it's always in your blood when you've been there for so long. Now I know I'm keeping you from your lunch. It's already 1 o'clock. Now I just want to touch on a few things first. I enjoyed what the panelists said, and I think it's very important that we recognize the implication of 4IR in the higher education system, how universities respond and provide knowledge and graduates that can address 4IR, how the industry can actually take advantage of it. And I also think that there is a close connection of 4IR and COVID-19. We have been sailing along on this 4IR since 2017 when the blueprints came out. And my question initially, what has happened since then? How has the universities and institutions translated those things into their own institution goals and strategies and programs? I sometimes am not so sure what has transpired in the last 4 years, so it's not exactly a new topic. But COVID-19 gave us no choice. Overnight, they push us to look at 4IR, whether we like it or not, because suddenly everybody has to go online, everybody has to pick up the technology, everybody start looking back at how ready they are in terms of technology within the system. And I understand that part of the question that I've been talking about today, I will go straight to the level of institution, the graduates, and how QA related. The biggest thing that came to my mind when Dato Ansari asked me to relook at what I'm going to say is, can the current QA system remain? Is there a need to actually review, revise, reset, because the changes that have taken place within the universities and within the programs and so on? Let me start by saying, and I think one of the panel talked about, whether you go and you get an online degree or you get a conventional degree, the quality should be the same. Yes? Yes? Yes or no? Yes. I mean, if you start with that premise that the quality of the degree should be the same, then you work backwards to see how did the student got awarded with a degree and what systems have been used. From a QA angle, because QA angle looks at policies, procedures, systems, and so on, how to assure that the quality of the program and learning is there. How do we create confidence that the programs and qualification are of the same, of the standing that is expected, and so on. So if you work backwards, quality assurance become an important instrument. I'm just saying that maybe I come from the QA background, QA has to stay, not necessarily so, but I think QA system has to transform. Yeah. Now let me look at some of these issues. Big question by, I think Dato Khalid earlier on mentioned, are we producing graduates for employment? Are we producing high quality workforce and quality citizens? How do we future-proof our graduates? There are two things that I like to say here first, before I go into details on the QA. Often we prescribe or we describe the profile of our graduates. Yeah, at the national level, there's prescribed the attributes of the graduates. At most institutions that I know of, you describe what kind of graduates you want. Yeah, you actually tell this is the kind of qualities of the graduates that you expected. Yeah, and therefore, the qualities that's been mentioned today by our speaker from Harold Ward and so on, talks about quality of graduates who are competent, who are knowledgeable, who have high cognitive skills, who are resilient, who are balanced, technologically competent, and globally competitive. That's the kind of ingredients or elements that we are looking for. Yeah, and that has to be transcribed in your programs. Yeah, and the other one that says for us to future-proof our learners and graduates, our people, they must be lifelong learners. Yeah. Now, how does it get into your program? How is it that your program is designed and delivered, and the students are assessed so that all these competencies are being assessed? Agreed, it is difficult to assess the soft skill, it's difficult to measure resilience. I always have a big question because in the blueprint we talk about resilient people, resilient graduates. Now, it's a question that universities should ask and think creatively how that these elements can be actually embedded in your program. Creating lifelong learners is a must, because I think at the end of the day, the way they can be future-proof is for the learners themselves to be prepared, to be agile, to be adaptive, to be able to change and move on. And personal competency becomes important. So think about that, what you need to do to make sure that these graduates at the end of the day are able to meet those outcomes. What do you need to put in place? And these are generally quality issues. Your curriculum, your faculty members, your assessment mechanisms, your teaching and learning methodologies, the way you expose students to experiential learning. If you have work-based learning, practical, these are all activities that helps to build up those competencies, those learning outcomes that you have mentioned. And these processes of learning has to be efficient, has to be effective, and it's your internal system that decides that. This is where the quality assurance issue comes in. Are your processes in place? Are your resources in place to be provided to support that kind of learning objective? That's the other part of quality assurance, because a lot of things have been mentioned today. Yes, we need to change the way we teach. It is true, you can use a lot of digital technologies today to be able to reach certain objective of your program. Your curriculum content, how do you decide on curriculum content and so on? So you need to think about it. So I would think that faculties, technologically competent infrastructure become part of their quality assurance mechanism to ensure those objectives are being fulfilled. And of course, as you move from traditional teaching and learning to more innovative learning, you find the technologies are there for you to use. My personal view, or in the qualification framework point of view, digital skills, digital tools, these technologies are tools to be used by human beings to learn, to solve problems, to create, and so on. I'm so worried one day they program us into of human being programming those tools to be used. Yeah. So I think the factors to be used is how you translate into QA for the new paradigm. Yeah, you're talking about the new way of teaching, the new way of learning, the new way of assessment. I think there are always this question, how do we know learning has taken place? How do we know the objective have been met? How do we assess? So there are many mechanisms today that they can use and so on. So we need to rethink. The QA traditional method cannot be followed. I mean, many QA bodies across the world during this COVID-19 stop visit, or they postpone the visit. I sit on the Hong Kong Accreditation Council. They never stopped. They actually conducted virtual site visit. They conduct interviews online with the institutions and so on. I think that also happened in some other countries and so on. So technology is now being used in even QA processes. Submission, virtual visit, interviews, and so on by Zoom and all the other application is available to be used in the process of checking quality. And it is available and it should be used. And if you, I always look at the other side of how can you quality assure the learning that we are getting. Now, with all the technologies, if you go back and look at your universities, you can actually do a checklist to say, okay, I've got this kind of technologies in place, this kind of application in place. How do I assess social responsibility by using these technologies? How do I assess communication skill by using these technologies? You can actually work out and say, what are the technologies that you have or you don't have that can actually assess teaching, learning, and assessment of learning outcomes. So my take on COVID-19, I see the bell ringing two times. I know you all are very hungry. I've just joined Quest University, and I learned that there's a need for consultation, there's a need for quick communication, there's a need for quick decision, because you need to take training immediately to turn people who are traditional lecturers into online teaching. You need to prepare the students, you need to prepare the systems and so on. It can be done. Yeah, you can reach international students through your web seminar or your online application. I really enjoyed the fact that you are not leaving your international students outside and without any communication. Those technologies are useful and to be used so that your outreach is not, you don't see the isolation actually. Technology opens you to the rest of the world. So please, there's always a quality assurance issue in every step you take in comes to teaching, learning, assessment, and so on, even in your services. Always make sure that your services meets your quality objective. And then you know whether you're doing it right. There's so many ways of doing it that at the end of the day, you're consciously done, that quality is maintained. Again, I end up what I'm going to say by saying, if you say online qualification and traditional qualification is the same quality, the journey might be different, the processes might be different, the tools used might be different, but it has to ensure that the learning at the end of the day is the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for keeping to your time. We are actually running short of time. We started late and we're finishing well into the lunch hour. I know everybody is hungry and wanting to go for lunch. It's been a heavy session. I'll just allow one question from the floor. Somebody has a burning question and will not be satisfied going for lunch without asking the question. There you go. One short question.
Good afternoon, Jeffrey Louis Nape. I asked a question earlier to the first panel. Is the leadership a failure in education? YB came in, second slot, and said, presented all the data. YB, has leadership failed you in Sabah? Number 3, all presenters had actually presented about IR 4.0. To note, do we have the right leadership to take on IR 4.0? With the kind of people that has been added into all government, all the units that they form, we've got this 20, 25-year-old, 30-year-old academician sitting there. Where are the young guys? Where are the young leaders in there to drive the education industry? Because people who've been there 20, 25 years, 30 years, have been there. And that's where we are today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. YB, maybe you'd like to respond?
Thank you for the questions. This is, I think, common questions everywhere. When we have a dialogue, the people down there only ask the leaders, do that, do this, do that. And my answer is, what the youngsters are doing. Of course, I'm the minister. I lead the direction where I should go. But we want the youngsters to come out. Rather than talking in the internet, talking in the WhatsApp or IG, please group together and do something. Because the leaders many are old leaders, maybe our generation is different, the gap is there. We want the youngsters to come up and get with the ideas and propose to us. We can consider and we work together. This is a new era. So in my kawasan also the same. They said, YB bagi peruntukan for this pertanian, we do it. But the youngsters didn't have any plan to have that. I used to ask them, you do and we support you. But if you want everything from us, I think maybe it's too late or we are not reached at your level of thinking because you are youngsters, your generation is different generations. But of course we need to work together. It's the leaders, they need to have directions and support. And the youngsters need also with new ideas, new input, how to implement, how to do these things with your generation, because this is for you. The future is yours. My future is very short. Yours is still very long to go. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So on behalf of all the speakers and panelists here, I'd like to thank Tan Sri Michael for inviting all of us to be here and to me personally to chair this session. It's been a wonderful session. I know we're running short of time. I was right back to the MC. Thank you very much. Our warm round of applause to all the panelists.
Thank you very much, Professor.